Okay, so 10 Connect project, as I've said, is an Interreg Europe project. And the goal of Interreg Europe projects are to work on policy instruments to improve various policies and public actions on various themes. 10 Connect specifically is focused on transport and on transport connectivity, and mainly it's focused on the maximizing the benefits of the European transport network, so the 10T network. Oh, Francesco is here. So, good morning. Good morning.
Hi.
I started already, but I haven't posed any questions yet, so you come on time. Okay, so the project is focused on maximizing the positive benefits and impacts of the 10T network and to enhance regional policies to ensure connectivity, mobility on a sustainability aspect of things, and to ensure that regions that are more peripheral or rural and usually not that connected can be and can become more connected and integrated with the overall transport network. So I think my first question for you would be if you could describe a bit what you think is the role or the goal or the mission for Transport Infrastructure Ireland to ensure this connectivity throughout the region and throughout the country.
Will I start with that, Derek? Just to give an overview of what TI do. I suppose Transport Infrastructure Ireland have responsibility for the main national roads in the country. So what other countries might call highways, we would call national roads. So we have responsibility for that. We also have responsibility for light rail and metro. And there's currently a project to connect Dublin Airport to the city centre via metro and then via light rail onto the main train stations. So that would come under one of the 10T goals. So we have been working on, we have two main routes, three main road routes within the country. One that used to run from Belfast down to Dublin before Brexit, but which now stops at the Northern Ireland border. One that runs from Dublin to Cork, where there's a core port and a core airport, and one that runs from Dublin to Limerick, where there is a core port just outside Limerick city in a place called Foynes. So those three routes, the Dublin-Belfast one is complete to 10T standard. From Dublin to Cork City and Dublin to Limerick City are both complete to 10T standard. And the final links from Cork City out to the port and from Limerick City out to Foynes are both under construction at the moment and will be in place by 2030. As well as that, we have various roles around the provision of charging infrastructure and meeting the AFIR regulations and what's brought into the 10T regulations for providing alternative fuels facilities, and we're working on that, and we have let a couple of projects, grant-aided projects, to provide high-speed electrical charging infrastructure on the 10T network and the appropriate service areas and safe and secure parking. There's a program of rolling that out as well. So the intention is to have for the core 10T to have all that in place by 2030 as per the regulations. Comprehensive 10T, there's a bit more work to be done on that. Some of it is already at or exceeds the standard required by 10T. Others not so much, and there are projects that are currently on our books to upgrade the comprehensive network to get it to the requirements by 2050. I don't know, Derek, is there anything I've forgotten there?
Yeah, no, that's comprehensive, if I can use that 10T word. But no, I just add maybe a little bit more, like the nature of Ireland is, I suppose in very simplistic terms, and this is the same on the current comprehensive network, the East Coast would be very busy, and the portal to Europe is that side. So a lot of freight coming from all over the country on the 10T network funnels its way to the ports, on the East Coast, I suppose. But it's very important to have that connectivity on the West Coast as well. And the Atlantic corridor is a counterbalance to all the development on the East Coast over the years. Just in general about our national road network, the core and the comprehensive TEN-T networks largely map to our national primary network, but there's a couple of key corridors that we would say in our national primary network that wouldn't be on it, like the Limerick to Waterford, for instance, is what we call the N24. That's not on TEN-T core or comprehensive. What else? The type of users on our national road system and our TEN-T system, we have to cater for everything or consider everything from big heavy trucks right down to people on bicycles almost, so that's we have to use our judgment and etc. Like in some places, it's we want to facilitate active travel along the road. In other places, we don't want them on the road for their own safety, So one thing I'll add to what Richard was saying about our remit is greenways as well. And thankfully, say on one of our busiest TEN-T corridors at the N7 coming into Dublin, we have a greenway corridor from North Kildare into Dublin that just fully opened recently, and it's great to be able to enable, I suppose, walkers and cyclists and have an option away from a busy road where they shouldn't be, and so it's quite, as I said, comprehensive what we do, and we in our organisation we have to consider everybody who uses the road, and it's a lot of diverse users.
Actually, that's a good point. Yeah. Sorry, Daniel, just to pick up on Derek's point there about the active travel users. That's a good point that I forgot to mention. Obviously, much of our core and, well, all of our core and much of our comprehensive network would be of motorway standard, where walkers and cyclists are not. They're actually excluded by law from being part of the road. Mm-hmm. So quite independently of the roads, we have developed a national cycle network plan. Many of those national cycle network plan routes would parallel the TEN-T routes. So there would be a section of the national cycle network that goes north out of Dublin towards Belfast. There would be a section that goes towards the southwest, towards Cork and Limerick. So there is a separate active travel network being planned and rolled out, separate to the roads network, particularly in those areas where cyclists and walkers are excluded by law from the roads.
What I was going to say is that ties very well with my next two questions. So I took a look at your website before this interview, and I saw not only the Greenway Projects initiative, but also the National Roads Active Travel. And I think I have two questions regarding these two initiatives. First was, can you talk a bit about the main challenges with implementing these projects? What's been the hardest part of creating these networks and of implementing these networks? And then what do you think is the benefits and the impact that the corridors that have already been developed and implemented are bringing to communities that live there? What's the general feedback from people, and how do you think this has been positive for just general connection and daily life of these communities?
Are you talking roads and active travel, or just active travel on that, Daniela?
Just the active travel initiative.
Okay, I mean, Derek, you might talk to the benefits, but I might talk to the challenges.
Yeah.
I suppose challenges, public buy-in can be a significant challenge for when we go off-road with active travel for greenways and the like. Landowners sometimes have a difficulty understanding the benefit of losing land, or having to deal with severance, or potentially having additional people having access to their land, albeit within a corridor, a greenway corridor, but potentially being able to jump over a fence and access their fields. They see issues with that, and it's something we are struggling with to try and get that buy-in from some landowners. Not all, but certainly some landowners would have legitimate concerns, but concerns that we think could be overcome. but it's to try and get that message out there. And Derek will probably talk to pieces of work that we're looking at doing to try and capture some of the positive stories and offset some of the concerns that they have. The other issue, I think, which is something that is universal, is the environmental challenge. And I mean, not just environmental as in birds and flora and fauna, but also carbon and those other air quality aspects. To try and deliver any project, any infrastructure project at the moment is challenging. And particularly when, for greenways, we want them to be scenic. We want them to be attractive for the leisure users as well as the purposeful users. And for something to be scenic, it usually means it's going into an area of environmental sensitivity. And then we run into the difficulties of how do we justify that, and how do we balance the impacts that the project will inevitably have environmentally versus the benefits that it will have from a community and from a recreation and from a personal benefit, personal usage. So obviously those are the big ticket items. Cost is always an issue. Resources in the country and having the correct skills available to us to deliver these projects and deliver them at pace is a further challenge. And our planning process can be complicated. It's perhaps something that's maybe uniquely Irish, and you don't have on the continent with your slightly different legal systems. But we're at a stage where any individual can maybe challenge a planning decision through the courts, and as a result, projects can be delayed quite significantly as they work through the court process and that challenge. But yeah, having talked about the negatives, Derek, hand over to you to talk about the positives.
Well, okay.
Let me just say that that's not uniquely Irish. So I'm Portuguese, and in Portugal it's the same. So everybody can just go up to whomever and say, oh, we don't agree with this, let's hold it. And that does happen. So not uniquely Irish.
Very frustrating when it happens.
Yeah.
I could come in and just on the challenges. I suppose for somebody who's engaged in active travel, they don't actually know or particularly care which agency or local authority kind of provides the infrastructure. They wouldn't know, but there's we have different remits amongst different agencies in Ireland, whether local or national. But if you're getting on your bicycle or even walking or going on a e-scooter, you're making a trip and you're probably straddling across different local authorities, different infrastructure provided by different agencies, etc. And I think a problem or a challenge is there are many of us in Ireland, like in any country. There are many, regional, national, local agencies. So that's one challenge. But Richard in particular would have been involved with for a national cycle network, engaging with many of the stakeholders. But I think the key word though is network as well. Anybody who's making a trip needs a full network, and when we all provide our 10 kilometers or 5 kilometers of high quality active travel infrastructure, it's very important that that's connected all the way for people for all the trips they make, because it's the weakest link in the chain that kind of, particularly for active travel, lets it down. If you go on a bad road for a section and it's good road elsewhere, you're still safe, etc. Largely. But if you're on a bicycle, etc., particularly with people who aren't middle-aged men in Lycra or whatever, they will not go on take that chance, So that's one challenge. But we're doing our bit in TI, and we're again funding is another challenge. But what we looked at in recent years again was severance. Where have large roads, motorways prevented people from making a trip across? So we're acknowledging that we don't have. In this instance, we don't have to carry people on our big, important national road, but we have to ensure that they can get across. And sometimes the road came along, in many cases, before the land changed around it, and housing estates, residential areas, shops were put in either side of the road after, and then the road becomes a barrier for these people. So we're beginning to look at that again. It's funding dependent, but the last thing I'll finish on a benefit and say, like active travel gets a lot of attention for its climate benefits, but in actual fact, a lot of trips are local, and a lot of them, particularly on greenways, are recreation based. So there's a lot of benefit for mental and physical health, with active travel. And I think that's a story that has to be told more. That active travel is just good for us, as well as being good for the climate, etc. So as long as we can stay safe when we're on a bicycle or walking or whatever, um, it's just a positive story for people, and I think it's changing across the country. A lot of active travel infrastructure in the cities, on greenways in rural Ireland, etc. And sometimes we get frustrated with ourselves. We think it's slow, but when you look back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we've come a long way, So I think it's a good story.
What you think would be so I know you already have some projects that are nearing the end, and that will be ideally developed by 2030. You've already mentioned that. After that, what would be the key goals? What is the targets around either infrastructure or other, I don't know, projects or initiatives that you think need to be the next priority?
I'll just start on that and hand over to Richard. I think the priority is kind of, a better understand. First of all, a better understanding of all the stuff that our transport infrastructure carries. So we're involved with light rail in the cities. That's carriage of people. It's very efficient. It's zero carbon. It's electric, etc. But we're also on the roads involved in everything else: carriage of people, carriage of goods, enabling services. So that's there isn't a full understanding of that, of the breadth of functionality of the road network in particular. So the first thing is getting everybody to understand, the food you have on your table every day, that was carried in a big truck on a road. And, we bandy around terms like sustainability a lot, and people don't think of the national road or the truck travel, for instance, as being part of that. But our lives wouldn't be sustainable. We wouldn't have food if, etc., and all the materials to build our homes if we didn't have these roads. But in general, I think an understanding of our networks, and then proper integration, whether it's people or movement or freight movement or whatever, ensuring that the train and the rail and the road networks work together. Similarly, road for and light rail and bus and everything else for carriage of people. It's the goal should be integration of those modes, and not kind of a siloed mentality, or saying one is better than the other. It's the users don't have those silos in their head, and they hop from one to the other. And I think as government agencies, etc., we're all working more together now than maybe we did 10 years ago, and we have to continue in that regard. Richard, would you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we're facing at the moment is a significant increase in our population with corresponding increase in car ownership. And that's leading to challenges on the existing network, where congestion was a problem before, is now getting significantly worse, and areas where congestion wasn't a problem is now becoming a problem. And that is a challenge we're going to have to tackle. And that's not necessarily a roads challenge, as in building more roads, because that's not always the solution. We take the ring road around Dublin, the M50. We upgraded that 15 years ago, added more lanes, upgraded the interchanges. It's now way beyond capacity again. And well, A, we don't have space to add more lanes, but B, that's not the right solution. There are other solutions. So I think that's one of the challenges we're going to be facing. Is how we deal with an increasing population and how we deal with increased traffic on our roads, even allowing for sort of the offset to active travel and other modes. But we're still going to have, because the population increases, we're going to have more vehicles, even as we try and get people out of their vehicles. And how we manage that, and how we keep our network running, how we keep, as Derek says, the food coming to our tables, so the trucks can get through rather than have the trucks sitting in congested roads and going nowhere. So I think that's a big one.
Is that applicable to the entire country, or is that more focused on metropolitan areas? Do like rural regions have the same? Are they facing the same problem? Because well, in Portugal, for example, there's that sort of movement of people from rural areas to metropolitan areas is still going on. And we have a lot of people sort of on our coast, but not many people on the most inner regions of the country. And so we have different challenges regarding transport, because there are very variant sort of demographics between the two parts of the country, if we can just like split it in the middle. Is that something that happens in Ireland as well, or
It's the same. I think it's the same. The same, maybe for countries on the Atlantic periphery, like yeah, some parts have suffered depopulation, etc. And in Ireland there's been a gravitation towards the east coast over time. Wasn't always like that. And that creates transport problems. In terms of congestion, I wouldn't say, I'd say the urban areas experience most congestion, but road safety is an issue everywhere, and that's where improved infrastructure helps. For people in more peripheral locations, there isn't a critical mass maybe of people that you would require to have a really good public transport service, I would imagine. So that's a challenge. So car is very, very important to people in these locations. And the roads, we used to have train lines on our west coast 100 years ago, but with depopulation and for whatever economic reasons, they're not operational anymore. So the road is really a lifeline for these communities. So it's different. There isn't choice for all people around Ireland in terms of transport modes, etc. Most of the congestion will be in the urban areas, as Richard mentioned, the M50. Serious congestion at times. It's really good. It's a great road. Other times it does so much for the country, for everybody in the country. But it's that interaction of kind of local transport needs in Dublin and the national transport needs. It's a 10T node and a major 10T artery kind of clashing, So that is a challenge. I'm sure it's a challenge across Europe. It's such a strategically important piece of transport infrastructure for both locals and the country. The airport and Dublin Port hang off it. And if you look at a map of the 10T network, you'll see the core corridors from the M1 Belfast to Dublin, and then the southwest of Ireland into Dublin. They connect in on this orbital route of Dublin, the M50. So it's doing a lot, congestion, to answer your question, is more of an issue in the urban areas around Ireland. But safety and other things are a key consideration for non-urban areas too.
We still have some of our main roads going through towns and villages. So they are still the main street of some of our towns and villages are national primary roads. And that causes its own problems. It might be short-lived congestion, but it can be quite significant in those locations. Impacts on the efficiency of our network and impacts on the quality of life of the people living there. So while Derek's right, Dublin and Cork, Limerick, Galway are probably the cities, and the congestion are the main issues there, but it happens elsewhere as well, where we haven't managed to bypass some of these towns and villages.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost at the end, so I think my final question is, what would be your main advice for people working on this topic, for any institution working on transportation? What would be your main advice?
I would say in one sentence, get a good understanding of the users and their needs. And Richard would be more of an expert on the provision of the infrastructure, so hand over to you for that one.
Patience, maybe. Be patient. This is not going to be delivered. Nothing is going to be delivered quickly. And I think also maybe one of our learnings from Greenways is, don't assume just because something looks good that everybody's going to see it as good. Like that was the trap we fell into in Greenways. We thought Greenways, it's obvious, they're great. but not everybody saw it that way. And as a result, we found ourselves a little bit on the back foot, having to go back now and justify and explain to people why greenways are good. So be proactive in pushing forward the benefits of what you're trying to do, and don't assume that they're evident to everyone.
Okay, thank you. That was very good.
Okay.
Very good final note. Thank you very much for your time. As I've said, as soon as we have the video published, we're going to send it to you. And thank you very much for your cooperation.
No, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you,
Thank you.
Derek. Thank you so much.